All right, more on my controversial topic of personality, and in this case, Zizek's lack of perception on the point of personality, uh, which I'll demonstrate as part of a critique of some of his comments on David Lynch, and specifically on the film Wild at Heart, where Nicolas Cage is taking over this Orpheus descendant Marlon Brando character with who was called Snakeskin, wearing a snakeskin jacket. But the scene in question doesn't concern the main character, but rather his romantic interest, and Willem Dafoe, while she's in a hotel room, and Willem Dafoe accosts her, and then physically threatening her, forces her to just say the words, fuck me, after which, her uttering those words, he says, oh, well, thanks for the offer, but, I'm not in the mood right now, and anyway, etc. And Zizek says this thereby humiliates her worse, or uh, does something more um, obscene than would be the case if he had actually raped her. Then he says Mr. Lynch, when interviewed on this point, produced some stupidities. Said, "Oh well, yes, I just thought that would be a good line," or something like that. Okay, first of all, what Zizek is not noticing is that Mr. Lynch has a writer called Barry Gifford, who is a full-sized personality and understands what he's writing. So when Zizek makes the claim um, that one can hoist, as it were, the Platonic view of the poet, or Socrates is staged by Plato, and his dialogues um, shows that usually the rhapsodes, or the people that sort of the troubadours who played Iliad and Odyssey, didn't really understand what was behind it, even though they were very learned and they knew a great many things, but they didn't have the wisdom of Homer. They didn't know why they produced the innovations they produced. Um, Sorry, I say innovations just because I was thinking of this issue of these British guys that went to Albania, and then they observed the actions of these people who recite epic poetry, and saw that every so often the bards themselves, or the rhapsodes themselves, were improvising, even if only once in 5,000 lines or something, But that over hundreds of years, that all adds up, and then, in a certain sense, you could say the performing artists themselves were the ones that were composing these things. But leaving that aside, in this case, we have something that is not quite clear, which is that you have a director making a film, and he's keeps the actors happy, and he chooses the actors, and he's choosing people after, in this case, Mr. Lynch is choosing people who are sort of similar in personality scope to himself. So he's a relatively small but centered personality with depth. I give an exact, almost exact analogy for what with depth means and what without depth means. Quentin Tarantino occupies a similar space, but he does not have depth. But anyway, this line that Lynch produces stupidity about, Zizek then says, well, isn't that the sign of the genius, the person who has a genius for poetry or for film, that there's something irreducible that they don't really have access to, or whatever. So no, that's absolutely not true. It's just that he's sort of a small and superficial personality who really deserves what, in many of his films, who really deserves what Ebert said about the film in question, which is that it's sort of like Lynch keeps saying, look, mom, no arms or whatever. Actually, I heard once that a soldier who in I don't know, it was Afghanistan or the Iraq War, but he got his arms blown off, and he actually said that. He said, "Look, mom, no arms," while his arms were blown off. Um, but this is the behavior of Lynch, just saying, sort of, "Look, mom, look at me, look at what I'm doing," like trying to get attention. So these sort of overblown uh, violent scenes, like when Willem Dafoe's head gets blown off, which originally got an X rating, but then was not actually altered and came out that way. I think there's a lot of this. Is Lynch is not a great. What I want to say is Lynch is not a great director in the full sense. It's obscure whether we have to say he's a great director in some sense. That I don't really quite grasp, but he's obviously not of the stature of August Strindberg. He's not of the stature of Diaghilev. He's not of the stature of. But it's hard to know what to compare him to because film is a young genre. So, but certainly there are great film directors, Kurosawa or um, uh, who can one say offhand is Tarkovsky or there's many who are obviously great. Lynch is not one of them. His content is very he's like a midget. Um, so, but interestingly, there's an example of the personality division that I wanted to make before, which I did very feebly with Tom Cruise and Matthew McConaughey as Aries and Zeus types. Same in strength, but less in cleverness, let's say, for the Aries type, which then makes them angry and starts this friction, which then starts wars. And so that the gods, the ideas of these gods reflects human personality. Um, so in the film we're mentioning, no, sorry, not in Wild at Heart, but in Lost Highway. In Lost Highway, the the guy that plays the gangster, who was the guy that was in Scarface, he's more like on the side of the Achilles type. And then there's Robert Blake, who plays the higher type. But those are directly related personality types. Lynch could see that, so that's why he cast it that way. It's just a step up. So you have one that has the same amount of pugnacity or physical courage, confidence, but a greater amount of cleverness. So the higher type is the Robert Loggia type. Oh, sorry, the higher type is the Robert Blake type, and the lower type is the Robert Loggia type. I think it's clear in that example. And that's a more substantive example, but it's not an example at the highest level. But I still think it's a good way to key in to the sense of personality and spotting personality directly so that it becomes a subject matter which is visible, and so that it becomes, in that sense, objective because other competent observers note it and can see it, and therefore it can become an object of study.